Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Hope you had a pleasant weekend. It is time for one of my favorite segments on the YouTube and hopefully one of yours. History by Mail has returned for the month of November. If anybody wants a little QR code for this stuff, there you go right there. This is... Okay, it was a month ago. Let's try to remember. It is the Diplomacy Unit. This would be part 3 of 4. Last month, it was, if I recall correctly, the tale of Abraham Lincoln and King Rama IV of Siam. So let's go in and see what in the world we have this time. Okay. We have a transcript of... What is on the back? Okay, I cannot... Your Imperial Highness... What? Peking. 1864? Interesting. And okay, so Peking, I'm going to assume that's Chinese. Let's see if I can actually get that to stand up. Hey, look at that. Now we have something to look at. All right, what in the world is this is the question. Okay, we have a transcript and then we have a thing. So let's take a look at the transcript, shall we? Transcript of Union letter to prevent Confederate ships in Chinese water? March 8th, 1864. I do not know what this is. Legation of the United States, Peking, March 8th, 1864. To His Imperial Highness Prince Kung. Sir, Your Imperial Highness is aware that for some time past a rebellion has existed in the United States against the authority of the same. I am happy to inform you that now, after 3 years' contest, it has been beaten from more than half of the space originally occupied by it, and that it is surrounded by our armies and navy, and must perhaps during the present year be destroyed. Obviously, they're talking about the Civil War. The rebels, in their desperation, have contrived to buy and arm a few steamers with no other object than to destroy the peaceful commerce of the United States. As they have no ports in their own country into which they can take their prizes, all other nations forbid them their harbors. They burn them at sea, and thus violate the law of justice in nations. One of these steamers, the Alabama, flying before the war vessels of the United States, has come into the seas near the coast of China, and in those south of it has already burnt several vessels. Now this is to request that the imperial government will, in consideration of its treaty obligations and the friendship which has always existed between China and the United States, and in the interests of universal commerce, by proclamation, deny to that steamer or any others sailing from the so-called Confederacy entrance into the waters and ports of China. And to the end that proclamation may be effectual, that the imperial government will instruct its officers to be vigilant against these steamers, and that if by chance any of them shall get within the waters or ports of China, that no supplies of any kind whatsoever shall be given to them under the severest penalties, nor shall they be allowed to buy any coal or ammunition. In making this request, I invite you to do nothing which is not clearly in the interests of the government or inconsistent with international obligations. The so-called Confederacy has not been and cannot be recognized by anybody. It has no right to bring its strife into your waters, and if it should do so after you shall forbid it, it will put itself in the wrong. Actions such as I request will be in the spirit of the present treaty of the 34th article of the Treaty of Wanghia, which forbids relations with any individual state of the United States. It will strengthen more and more the friendship between the two existing governments and commend itself to the justice and good sense of the world. I have the honor to be, sir, your obedient servant, Anson Burlingame. This is a massive chapter in the... I was completely unaware of this. Okay. So now we have the little history behind it. So there you go. The Union letter to prevent Confederate ships in Chinese waters. Okay, here we go. The U.S. ambassador to China, Anson Burlingame, sent the enclosed letter during the Civil War to the Chinese Foreign Minister, Prince Kung, requesting China to deny access to the Confederate ships in Chinese waters. 8 days later, Burlingame received a response from Prince Kung agreeing to this request. Burlingame retained the enclosed Chinese language copy of his letter as a record. 19th century Western diplomacy with China. The First Opium War was fought from 1839 to 1842 between the United Kingdom and the Qing dynasty. After Chinese officials banned the opium trade, seized opium inventory, and threatened the death penalty for those caught trading opium, the British fought to retain their trade interests. Demand for Chinese luxury goods in Europe had created a trade imbalance between Britain and China. To counter the imbalance, the British East India Company allowed British merchants to sell opium to Chinese smugglers for illegal resale in China. The company grew the opium in Bengal, part of today's India, and Bangladesh. China, worried about increasing opium addictions and losing their trade surplus, took efforts to wipe out the opium trade. Using a tactic later called gunboat diplomacy, that name says it all, the British used the threat of their technologically advanced weapons and ships to force the Chinese to sign the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, which ceded Hong Kong Island to the British, opened 5 ports to British merchants, and granted various rights to the British subjects in China. As British interests grew over the next decade, the Second Opium War was fought from 1856 to 1860 between the Qing dynasty and Britain, France, and Russia. After China was again faced with superior European military technology, the Chinese signed the Convention of Peking, ceding the Kowloon Peninsula to the British as part of Hong Kong and parts of outer Manchuria to Russia. Anson Burlingame was a Massachusetts congressman who, from 1862 to 1867, served as the envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary to the Great Qing Empire. Is it King or Quing? That's throwing me off. Please, somebody correct me, and I apologize. A precursor to today's U.S. ambassador to China. America had sent diplomatic representatives to China since 1844, when U.S. Commissioner Caleb Cushing negotiated the Treaty of Wanghia, giving the U.S. most favored nation status, ensuring non-discriminatory trade practices between the countries, the right to try Americans in China under U.S. law, and other rights to Americans in China. Arriving in China just after the Second Opium War, Burlingame's cooperative negotiating style was a welcome change from the gunboat diplomacy the Chinese had experienced with other Western powers. The Chinese response. Burlingame leveraged his favorable relationship with the Qing dynasty officials to obtain an agreement from the Chinese to deny Confederate ships access to Chinese waters. Yixin, or in English, Prince Kung, was an imperial prince and Qing government official in charge of China's foreign policy who had negotiated the Convention of Peking at the end of the Second Opium War in 1860. 8 days after the enclosed letter was sent, Burlingame received Prince Kung's response, in which he wrote, "Your country is placed very much in the same position that China is, whose seditious subjects are now in revolt against her, and as it is highly proper to prevent this rebel steamer from injuring or molesting American merchant ships, if the steamer Alabama or any other ship intending to injure American shipping come into their jurisdiction, they are on no account to permit such vessel to come into any port." All right. Prince Kung understood the plight of the nation besieged with rebellion. China had just fought the Taiping Rebellion, a massive civil war lasting from 1850 to 1864, between the Qing dynasty and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, an unrecognized oppositional state in eastern China. The Heavenly Kingdom was a theocratic absolute monarchy, combining elements of Chinese folk religion and Christianity, which sought to overthrow the Qing dynasty and convert Chinese people to their version of Christianity. The monarchy was led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be the second son of God and the brother of Jesus. Okay? By the 1860s, the Heavenly Kingdom controlled a population of roughly 30 million people. The war between Taiping and Qing was one of the bloodiest in human history, with tens of millions dead. The Qing dynasty quashed the rebellion, but its scar still reverberates today and influences how communist China relates to religious minorities. The CSS Alabama, and CSS would be Confederate, I think the Confederate state ship. The CSS Alabama was a propeller-driven sloop of war with a deck holding up to 18 guns that was built in England for the Confederate States Navy. Despite England's neutrality in the American Civil War, shipbuilders could build warships if they were not armed until after the vessel sailed into international waters. The Alabama first sailed to the Azores Islands off the western coast of Portugal and served for 2 years as a commerce raider. The Alabama burned 65 Union merchant vessels around the world, causing millions in damage, and never visited a Confederate port. In June 1864, the Alabama docked in Cherbourg, France for repairs and provisions. Union ships, the USS Kearsarge and the USS St. Louis, blockaded the Alabama in the harbor. The ensuing Battle of Cherbourg was fought between the USS Kearsarge and the CSS Alabama, with a Union victory. The battle was visible from the French coast and was widely publicized. French modernist painter Edouard Manet made 2 paintings of the battle, based on the media descriptions and his own visit to Cherbourg a month later. The Kearsarge at Boulogne hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the Battle of the Kearsarge and the Alabama hangs in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Interesting. The Alabama Claims. In 1869, the U.S. government filed a series of claims against the United Kingdom for damages caused by the Confederate Navy commerce raiders that had been built in Britain during the war. The Americans claimed that by allowing 5 warships to be constructed, the most damaging of which was the Alabama, Britain had violated their neutrality in the Civil War. Secretary of State William Seward thought Britain may give up British Columbia in exchange for the Alabama claims. Even though American expansionist, British anti-imperialist, and Canadian separatist sentiments all aligned to giving up British Columbia, the Americans, eager to commence with reconstructing the nation after the long and bloody Civil War, opted to take money and not engaged in another project of territorial expansion. Canada later agreed to have British Columbia enter the Canadian Confederation in 1871. A commission of 6 Americans and 6 British arbiters met in Washington to resolve the Alabama claims and other international disputes. In 1872, Britain settled the claims by paying $15.5 million to the U.S., less claims against the U.S. for illegal Union blockades that harmed Canadian fisheries and British civilian losses during the war. The matter was sealed with the Treaty of Washington, which restored friendly relations between the 2 nations. Many historians believe the successful international arbitration of the Alabama claims set a precedent for future international arbitration. And finally, the Burlingame, I think that's how it would be pronounced, the Burlingame Treaty. In 1867, as Burlingame was about to retire to America, the Chinese government appointed him envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary to lead a Chinese diplomatic mission to America and Europe to negotiate what would become known as the Burlingame Treaty. Burlingame, originally a U.S. minister, was now negotiating on the side of the Chinese with Secretary of State William Seward, his former superior, in what became known, once again, as the Burlingame Treaty. The treaty, which was the first equal treaty between a Western nation and China after the Opium Wars, gave China most favored nation status regarding trade and lifted restrictions on Chinese immigration to America and travel within America. After Burlingame's death, many of the treaty's provisions were reversed and strict immigration laws prevented Chinese immigration to America. The enclosed letter provides an early glimpse into the American-Chinese trade and security relations. This is the third of 4 documents in the Diplomacy series. There's a website if you would like to check out more. In the realm of fascinating, and I'm pretty good on the Civil War. This is something I did not know, because when I looked in initially and I saw to prevent Confederate ships in Chinese waters in 1864, I was mighty confused. But this was really, really fascinating. And then we have, the recreation of the document on, kind of a different paper, aged paper. This is really, really fascinating. And that's, 1, why I love history, and 2, why I love doing this stuff, because I'm going to learn an awful lot. Just as I hope you guys learned an awful lot, and I hope you enjoyed it. because this is really fun. So we've had 3 diplomacy units, or 3 diplomacy lessons in the, unit. 1 more to come in December, and I cannot wait to see what that is. And then we will see how 2026 begins with History by Mail. So thank you guys so much. Let me know what you thought down below. Leave a like if you liked the video. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time.